The title of our talk this morning is Crystallization. And it's a concept talk, which means I'm going to try and hold one concept in the air throughout the whole talk, but it may not be successful. It's one of those things that tries to evaporate. And you can go and tell people that you heard a vapid talk this morning. There will be very little on the Bible, on St. Matthew's Gospel, and it will be anticlimactic in that the talk will basically be over by the time we get to the Bible. I've lived with various people from time to time, and at one time I lived with a composer who was one of the weirdest people I've ever known in life. I loved him dearly. He was a mentor to me, and I think of him often, and I'd still like to see him if I could. But he had a way that every now and then he would take his musical compositions and he would burn them. And I've known painters who would either stash or get rid of or sometimes even destroy their works. In fact, I think sometimes that great painters come back into reincarnation to do just that very thing. The reason they give for doing this is they say that having too much of their old work around stymies their creative process. It's almost like you figure, well, I've done all of this already. There's nothing more. And if you're looking at all of the obvious things, all the things that are complete, there's a tendency to not continue to go on with new creative activity. I have a friend now that is celebrating 50 years of a very successful career as a painter. But what's happening is, as soon as he told me that he wanted to have a retrospective, he's getting out all of those old pieces from the past days. He's quitting. He's done. He's said goodbye to his creative life. So at first I thought the whole idea was horrendous. And I was aghast at the idea that all of that lovely music or all of those paintings would be destroyed like that. I guess I must have some materialism or some possessiveness in me. But the more I thought about the concept, the more I liked it. It's more and more appealing to me. And I find that being a person that deals a lot with words, especially spoken words, the really good thing about the spoken word is that it dissolves into the air when it's done, and then it's gone. It's all over. But even written words have this same quality to it. In fact, some cultures have a lot of, I guess, almost religious dogma about the idea of the written word, literalism. Especially in Islamic culture. In Arab Islamic culture, they have a statement that they say, it is written. And that means to say, it is written in the plan of Allah, and as soon as it is written, you can't do anything to counter it. In some parts of Arabic or Muslim culture, they use it to cover up black magic and things like that. When somebody dies, they say, oh, it was written, even though they were poisoning them or something like that. The best story of it, I don't know, have any of you ever seen that famous film of T.E. Lawrence called Lawrence of Arabia? The story in there, they're going across what is called the Devil's Anvil. They're fleeing the Turks. And he has all of the leaders who are to become the leaders of modern Saudi Arabia. And so they aren't destroyed, and so that the Turks can't lay claim in the First World War to Arabia, he's secreting the Arab leaders across the whole Arabian Peninsula. And he's got these different clans together, and the clans don't always get along with each other. And somewhere, one man is left as a laggard as they're crossing the Devil's Anvil, which they can only cross at night because it's so terrible. And Lawrence doesn't want him to die. And all the Arabian chieftains tell him, it is written. That man he's written off. It's written. And Lawrence won't hear of it. And so he goes out in the heat of the sun, like 120-degree temperatures, and he goes and physically carries the man out of the Devil's Anvil. And the chieftains all salute him for his bravery or his craziness to do that. And several days later, at a campfire, there's a squabble, and this man kills someone. And all of the chieftains tell him that he's in a terrible place, because basically there are two clans. And according to Arabic tradition, if somebody of your clan is killed, it's not only your right, it's your duty to take vengeance and kill somebody from the other clan. And when Lawrence of Arabia hears this, he says, oh my God, I'm going to lose everybody, because one is going to kill the other, and then somebody from the other clan is going to kill back. And the chieftains tell him that there is only one remedy. And the one remedy is that that man's life has to be taken, and the neutral party has to take it. And there's only one neutral party. And Lawrence takes the man out, and he puts a gun to his head, and the man accepts it. He says, it is written. So Lawrence comes back, and he's really downtrodden after having done everything to have to save the man's life. And the chieftains tell him, it is written. So it's that kind of literalism. Literalism is probably one of the worst kinds of dogmatism and one of the worst kinds of materialism, especially with mystical things. The more rare that something is, the more it crystallizes easily, and the more perfectly it crystallizes. There's a whole science of studying the blood, because if you take the blood from one individual and allow it to crystallize and compare it to the blood of another individual, you'll see that the crystals are very different from each other. In fact, it's something like the archetype, and it's something like the horoscope. The geometric patterns in the crystallization of blood are an indication of the spirituality of the individual whose blood it is. And the blood is the most rare part of our bodies. It's the most rare essence that we have, and it crystallizes. The more spiritual one is, the more perfectly the blood crystallizes. So, again, we're back at that same theme, taking something rare and crystallizing it and getting the most of experience out of it. I think it's always wise to remember that the best things, the very best things in life, are very evanescent. They all disappear into the air. Like if you take a smile, or if you take a sunset, or something like that. There are really a lot. From this point of view, doing a talk is very interesting. You can see how things are coming across to people. And it's wonderful to see some of the smiles that have been in these talks. You know, it lifts a person up, and you feel really, really, really perked up by it all. So, what we're going to do is we're going to take care. Yesterday we looked at St. Matthew's Gospel, and we looked at the dense physical body. We're trying to understand how to have a sound, dense physical body. We took a few baby steps yesterday, but the thing is, when we do that, we have to be careful that we don't fix on those steps too much, because they will be just like my friend who has all the paintings around and who is ending by that his creative career. So it's important that we don't do that. And if we tried to do everything anyway, it would defeat the whole purpose of coming together for a summer school. We don't come here to finish the Rosicrucian philosophy. We don't try to give every last detail. We don't try to work it out to the nth degree. The reason that we come here is to share a spirit. Yeah, we get some new thoughts. We get some ideas to work with. But the important thing is that we share the spirit. If we try to take the Rosicrucian philosophy as a dogma or as a doctrine, we'll kill it. And if we try to unify with each other by those means, we'll be totally unsuccessful. Because the more things are hardened into a physical stance, the more misunderstanding there is. If we want to be unified as a spiritual movement to really do something to change the world, the best thing that we can do is to tune all of our thoughts, all of our feelings to Christ and to the elder brothers. If we do that, then we're unified in spirit. You know, look what the Catholic Church has done. They've tried to put out bull after bull after bull that this means this means this, and it doesn't do anything to unify. We should take it from our temple service that the fellowship of the Spirit is the realization of God. All right. Most of the things that we get out of the Rosicrucian philosophy or out of the teaching of Christ require a lot of hard work. So that if there are ideas or inspirations that come from a talk like this, the best that we can expect is that we'll go home and have a lot of hard work. Max said the same thing. He says, I'm beginning to believe that when Max says that prayer and work constitute the heart of the teaching, I'm beginning to believe that they're both the same thing. that prayer is work, and it's very hard work. All right. While we're talking about Max, we're talking about the physical plane and the dense physical body that we have that relates us to that plane. When we look in the cosmic conception, very little is said about the dense physical plane. Max said science does a good job of working with it. And he says, I'll leave you to go to science, and he even recommended books like books on physiology. So he set the tone right there when he said that if we get the spirit of this, and if we work with it with our own understanding, it is in our purpose to carry out everything to the nth detail, especially in the material world. All right, we're going to get back to our principle of crystallization and the death that comes from it. In the Rosicrucian Cosmoconception and in other works, Max says that all of our bodies are condensations or crystallizations of emanations that come from the Spirit. They're all tailor-made. What our spiritual character is from our history of all of our past manifestations, not only as humans, but as plant-like, animal-like, and mineral-like beings, all of that becomes the character of our spirit. And the character of our spirit, the character of my spirit is ugly. But they're perfect expressions of what comes from within. He goes on to state that wonderful poem by Oliver Wendell Holmes, The Chambered Nautilus, where he likens our physical body, in fact, all of our personality, all four bodies, he likens them to the shell of a snail, where it's constantly excreted and it becomes the dwelling place. All of the spiritual truths, because they are spiritual, can be looked at from many points of view. You can always come back to them again and again, and they're always fresh, and they always have a different way of appearing to us. In the Rosicrucian funeral service, Max refers to the physical body as a prison of clay. Even though he loved the physical body and marveled at the wonder of it as a physiological creation, he revered it and he respected it. And he says we should always try to build more and more perfect bodies that we can work with, and that we should be comfortable with our bodies and get as much experience as we can out of them. But he says in the last analysis, it is a clay prison. It's a temporary apartment, just like the chambered nautilus we have to leave it for something bigger. Different spiritual schools say the same thing, but they say it in different ways. I'm just fascinated by how different people bring different sides out of it. It's really, really amazing. I study a lot of the Orphics. I like Pythagoreans and Plato and the Platonists. And their view of the physical body was that it was a walking sarcophagus, which means a flesh-eating stone, that it is our gravestone, that we're carrying our gravestone around all the time, and that it eats away our vitality until finally we die. It's a little extreme, but in some ways, our body, with all of the faults in it, all of the scars and all of the broken bones and all of the things in it, really is a record of our death. We're carrying our death around with us. It's a common theme among poets. Rainer Maria Rilke has some beautiful things to say about the walking death. Still, other schools talk about this same principle in another way. I have a friend that studies with a school of Tibetan Buddhism, and the monks are very strict, and they all live celibate lives, and they all live vegetarian lives, and they're very, very strict about their ways of living. And the monks love to tell the neophytes when they get too enamored with the material world and with their physical bodies, and they're about to become sensualists. The monks point out the attachment to a physical body that is appealing to someone, and they say, you know, that's really excrement. It's it's excreted from the spirit, and it's the end of the line. So you can see that even though some of these things are a little severe and a little extreme, it's exactly the same thing as when Max says that this is a vessel of clay. Now, we want to talk about how the physical body is built. We're talking about crystallization. And we started talking about the principle a little bit, and now we're going to keep going into it and keep coming back to it again and again and again. Because in order to have a sound, dense, physical body, we have to know how it is recreated each and every moment and how it was created in the first place. In the Rosicrucian Cosmoconception, there is a large passage that is dedicated to what could be called the extrovertive stream of creative activity. Or you could call it the stream of crystallization. In that passage, it describes how the spirit conceives an idea. Somehow the spirit is filled with the creative love of the life spirit. Just an impulse of it. And an idea is conceived. And that idea is projected into a thought, into the world of thought. If it is projected with vigor, with soul power, which we would call the will to live or the will to be, it becomes a thought that becomes clothed in thought material. And if it is to be about something more than just thinking, it gets projected into the desire world. And in the desire world, and in the individual desire body, in some cases, it takes on desire material. Again, the same things apply. If it is to be just about desire material, it goes no further. There are some people that live completely in their feelings, and they're almost oblivious to what happens in the external worlds, in the etheric and chemical regions of the physical world. They're not interested in that. They're interested in their feelings. But if it is a creative impulse that is to take on motivation for further manifestation, again, if the soul power is strong enough, it draws the motive material from the desire world and it gets projected into the physical world. In the physical world, sometimes things peter out there. We have a lot of thoughts or a lot of creative impulses that don't make it beyond the ethers. In fact, because of the limitation of the physical world, we cannot manifest all the thoughts we think. Sometimes, if you lay down and take a nap in a time when you're not tired, and when you're not even thinking about taking a nap, if you lay down and take a nap then, you can in effect wake up in the reflecting ether. And you can say, wow, I was thinking that and that and that and that, and it's all tied together. And then you can see the thoughts that actually did come to fruit in the physical body, but how there is a whole panoply of other thoughts that never made it this far. They didn't need to, or we didn't have sufficient interest, or the limitations of the physical didn't allow them all to come through. And they're all tied together, so that you can see that they all originated from the same thought. You can see how paranoids who withdraw from the physical and put their consciousness in the lower regions of the desire world and in the positive pole of a reflecting ether, how they had these long deductive trains. They had all this suspicion. They withdraw from the physical world because they feel disempowered and they can't do anything in the physical world. They think they're nothings. And so they create these grand delusions, and if everybody's after me, then I must be worth something. And when you do that, and you can see all of the logical trains, like that person over there mowing the lawn is sending a signal to somebody else, and then they're going to emanate some rays at me, and I'm going to be ill or something like that. But we have a lot of things that we, as spiritual beings, are not in our waking consciousness, which is beautiful and it's wonderful what we can do in our waking consciousness, but there's a tremendous illusion that we have that this is all there is to our spiritual consciousness, and it's not so. The spirit is doing many, many things just in the maintenance of our physical body. There are millions of reactions per day that take place in the physical body that sustain it. So, if there is sufficient willpower, the impulse gets carried through the ethers, and the purpose of the ethers, at least the lower ethers, is to give action to something. And so we take action, and when we take action, we bring something into concretion in the physical world, and we have a completed experience. As far as human consciousness is concerned, we cannot carry things any further to completion than completion in the physical world. So this is the stream of extroversion. This is one of the two streams that make up all creative activity. Macrocosmically, in the Rosicrucian philosophy, such as in the supplementary philosophy lessons, it says that macrocosmically, the whole process of the worlds being externalized or crystallized in the same way, that's called the materialization of the spirit. This same process is manifest on many levels simultaneously. The pair or the partner to this process could be called the stream of introversion. or the stream of decrystallization. It is when things break down and go into decadence and the essence is taken out of the experiences and absorbed back into the spirit. In macrocosm, in the Rosicrucian philosophy, this is called the spiritualization of matter. And it is from the compound cycle where we have experience and extract the energy or the essence out of it that we develop soul power. So that slowly, slowly, slowly we become more and more creatively potent. We can carry out more things. Our experiences become deeper. They become more ramified. And we get much, much more out of each moment of experience in the material world as we progress. Because of the compound activity of these two streams of activity, they're both within the universal spirit, because they are suspended within the spirit, nothing is lost. Even a feeble thought is not lost. Nothing is wasted in the cosmos. Everything is always there. Everything has its effect, and we always gain something from every kind of activity that we are involved in. This compound process is of utmost importance. It's probably one of the central things in the entire Rosicrucian cosmic conception. It is very complex, and we could spend a whole series of talks. I figure it would take about 20 talks of 90 minutes each to have a rough idea of the whole process. So what we're going to do again is just take baby steps and just look at dribs and drabs. Today, because we're trying to get at a sound physical body, we're going to look just at the extrovertive stream and a very little bit at that. As we said just a few moments ago, it is always active on several levels at the same time. Every little thought that we have is part of the same activity. I sit here trying to talk with my hands instead of trying to talk with my consciousness. That's the manifestation, a very light and weak manifestation, but it is a manifestation of that same thing. We utilize it whether we're trying to stroke somebody or whether we're trying to smite somebody. The same principle is used. As we just said, it is used when we build our bodies. Our bodies are a product of the same activity. Even macrocosmically, the whole evolutionary creation of which we are part manifests using the same extrovertive cycle. So we are really microcosms. We are made in the image of God. In the image of God, in that everything we do follows the same creative pattern that God utilizes in creating in the macrocosm. So it's simultaneously active on many levels. We're thinking thoughts all the time. And like, for example, I'm one of those people that I'm thinking about what I'm going to have for dinner while I'm eating breakfast. Sometimes I think my God is in my belly. But it's active on several levels all at the same time. And it's a really important thing to realize, because we do get into illusions and misconceptions in the physical world that nothing is extraneous to it. If we see fish, we see that fish are part of their environment and living in that environment. But we don't realize that with regard to the entire cosmos, the entire spiritual cosmos, we are part of that same kind of environment. And nothing in our environment is extraneous. Otherwise, we can get to these strange ideas. We take a bottle of fruit juice, we drink the bottle of fruit juice, and we throw away the bottle as being unessential. It's something dead. It's not part of what we're doing. That's a misconception, because actually everything that we are involved in is part of the whole process. And the more we can consider that, the more likely we are to work successfully with the cosmos. Everything, every life, every form is all part of the body of God. And everything is alive in this same kind of process. Now, it gets rather dicey, and you have to have a Virginian kind of mind to want to deal with the complexity. Some formations, some crystallizations endure longer than others. And there are modifications within all the time. Like if we think of it, we like to think of our body as something solid and something that is permanent and stationary. It isn't. Our body is a formation. There are cells coming in and out of it all the time. There are atoms coming in and out of it, but yet we are still in the basic thought of what our personality is and what we are doing, what our life is. It's still one very complex, very enduring life that allows for and that even activates all kinds of changes within it. What I'm trying to say is that there are thoughts within thoughts, and there are activities within thoughts on all of the other externalized planes. In the Rosicrucian philosophy, the fundamental thoughts are called creative archetypes. Everything that is manifest, including our bodies, is a consequence of a thought. Everything that becomes manifest in the phenomenal worlds is the consequence of a thought. That we want to keep that in mind, because what we think is what we're going to become. This means that some thoughts are going to be better thoughts. They're going to be more true to reality. Some are going to be more enduring. And some are going to be more complex and allow other things within them. Every day, we are perpetually renewing our attitudes. And the way we think every day is going to eventually affect the archetype of our life, the archetypes of all of our bodies, and subsequently the bodies themselves. This is one of the most practical things of all. We're called dreamers, but we realize that if we can keep our thoughts keen and sharp, especially if we can keep them positive, eventually it's going to result in a healthier body. The more true our thoughts are, if we don't become romantically enamored with our thoughts and romance them and hang on to them as if they were something special, if we don't hang on to them when they're wrong, by continuously understanding the truth of life and reality, we can improve the quality of our life. This is a really important thing. If we want to have a sound body, the way we think and the attitude that we have toward life is extremely important. All healing begins with attitude, or at least that's the first thing that Max Seindel said he did when he looked at a horoscope that involved healing. He looked first at the disposition of the mind to see how to get through to the person and to see what kind of state the person was in as far as healing would be possible. The original, the fundamental, the creative archetypes are the archetypes of our entire life and for each of the bodies. We have a master thought of what a life is. And we get the wonder of living it out while even forgetting it. It would be wonderful if we could keep that master thought in mind all the way through and live it out in full consciousness, just like a musician can memorize a piece of music and know exactly what comes next and put everything into the interpretation. But we get to see the wonder of it as though it just happens to us. But there is a master thought that is the master thought of our entire life. Actually, that thought is part of a much larger thought. The thought of the master thought that is conceived by God through the gods or through the creative hierarchies of humanity. Sort of like some of those, there are at least two Shakespeare statements where he says, "What is a man?" Sexist, but he says, "What is a man?" And brings out all of the things that cause you to think about what a human being is. There is something about humanity that there is an essential human condition. And that master thought of the human condition, the human stage of evolution, is what our idea of a human life comes out of. Eventually, all of our lives are modifications of our own individual archetype until we match that whole collective archetype of what a human is. It really adds meaning to that passage in the Bible that says, "What is a human that thou art mindful of him?" Really beautiful statement, as poetic as they come. Again, we've gotten ourselves into something much too large and something that we can't go all the way out with at this time, so we'll just move on to something else. When the Spirit, the self, or the God nature in us, receives a creative impulse, it rebuilds the archetype of the life, what the next life is going to be. This archetype, if we think on our life on a regular basis, as Rosicrucian probationers, at each of the turning points, the solstices and equinoxes, we are to take stock of what we have done in the last quarter and how does that fit into our conception of what our life is, which is modeled after the life of Christ Jesus. And so we build this archetype of a life and we are constantly rebuilding it. The archetype becomes ripe and we go through the experiences of life. Using sub-archetypes, each of the bodies is built in the same way. Now, because the fundamental archetypes of our entire life and each of our bodies are created when the Spirit is in its home. It's just been refreshed in third heaven and it sees the purpose of all of this. It has all the new soul power, doesn't have anything tied up in hang-ups or neuroses or things that keep us from having a full presence of our spiritual self. All the essence of all the past life has been brought into the Spirit, and the Spirit is strong at that moment. So filled with the purpose and filled with the new soul power, it creates very strong archetypes. The archetype of our life and the archetype of our body, which are built around the seed atoms, the experience from all of our past lives, those archetypes built on that foundation of the past with the full soul power and the full power of the Spirit last and they endure. So what we're saying is that the thoughts that we have every day, the little things that go through our mind, are very ephemeral. They're very weak. Even in our prayer sessions, when we think that we're thinking really intensely, they are weak by comparison to the thoughts that produce the original archetypes. So when we're trying to change, it's hard to change our mind. It takes a lot of self-conscious effort, of strong, clear, true, sustained thought to change our mind. It's even harder to change our physical body. Christ was stating a very great truth when he said, "Who among you by taking thought can change his body 1 inch?" Something to that effect. I don't think he knew about inches, but the British might think so. So, if we want to have a sound body, even over the course of several lives, to change the trajectory of our evolutionary career is not an easy process. But it can be done, because the same Christ that said, "Who among you can change your body 1 cubit by taking thought?" The same Christ said, "As a human thinketh in its heart, so is it." I'm trying to take the sexist things out. "As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he." Or, as St. Paul tells us, "Be ye renewed by the perfecting of your mind." All of this points to the fact that there is a hope that we can improve us and the quality of our life. The way this is done, this is going to be a repetition again, this is a concept talk, we'll keep coming back to the same concept. It is done by the stream of crystallization. If we can't have those powerful thoughts that produce new archetypes, at least by a sandblasting method, we can modify things. We can constantly put a stream of new positive thoughts, and we can set up a different atmosphere so that the old archetype can be seen and we can get better things out of it. That we live spiritual lives doesn't mean that we have different experiences than other people. Two people can be side by side doing exactly the same thing, and one could be a saint and one could be a sinner. One could be complaining on how bad it is and what a terrible job this is and how I deserve something better. And the other might be trying to perfect and put in positive thoughts into every action. And one would be having a life of joy and a life of inward glory. And the other has, like a dark, complaining morass of complaint. Not all of the thoughts, as we mentioned earlier, become crystallized all the way into the physical body. Some people are romantics. They are what psychologists call feeling types. They have the thoughts that mature in the desire body, and they go no further than that. Other people like just the energy and the action of it, but they don't care to carry things all the way out into the physical. They are active types. Then there are sensate types that don't even think about anything, don't feel anything. All they care about are the substance, the things of the world, the matters of the senses. And that is the totality of their existence. So when we're talking about the archetype of a life and the archetypes of each of the bodies, we're talking about something that can be stretched or pulled one way or another. It is always a task for us to try to have a just proportioning in our consciousness so that we aren't too much mental, that we aren't too much feeling, that we aren't too much active, that we aren't too much material. And if we're seeking a sound body, it is wise for us to apply ourselves to understand the archetype of this is a human being so that we keep a healthy balance. Anytime we selfishly hide ourselves in our feelings or selfishly indulge ourselves in our senses or do something of that order, we're stretching our personality and we're taking it out of shape. So if we want to have a sound physical body or a sound body altogether, we have to always keep that just proportioning in mind. God loves folk statements. The cheek of him to say things like that. Make hay while the sun shines, or strike while the iron is hot. Right now, the physical plane is ripe. And right now we have an overemphasis on material things. And it is just, it is correct that we make hay while the sun shines, because this world is not going to be here long. And as we saw yesterday, the limitations of this material world, the ability to develop the simple-minded looking at something and objectifying it so that we have an objective consciousness, we can only learn that in the most rudimentary, the most strict way here in this physical world. So while we are here in the physical world, and while the physical world is here, there is indeed an overemphasis on the physical. And that is important, provided we don't become materialistic, provided we don't make a sacred cow out of it or something like that, because if we don't develop the objectivism of feeling water, like the psychedelic people used to do back in the 60s, they put their hand in water and they would feel it. The reason that they did that is because they were a little bit loosened up from the physical, and they weren't taking the physical for granted. And they realized that there was a quality to water, the viscosity and the fluidity and all of those things. And if we can live our lives that way, we develop an objectivity. And for somebody like me, that's an important thing. So it is important that we do pay attention to the physical world, but not too much. So most of our thought does follow the externalizing stream right to the physical, right to the bitter, hard end of it. However, we're slow thinkers. The Rosicrucian cosmoconception tells us that most people take between 700 and 1,000 years to come back to birth. Max averages it out to 1,000 years. And in questions and answers, he says the reason for this is because we are very slow thinkers. To think out the archetype of a new life, to think out the archetype of new bodies that don't have the faults that the old ones had, and to bring in something completely new, it takes us a long time to think that out. I must have spent an enormous amount of time between lives. I'm a terribly slow thinker. It takes a long time for experiences to sink in. I had an experience that it took 30 years before. It was a simple experience. It took 30 years. I once rode a Mexican cab in Mexico City. And I drove out to the bus station to get out. I went up to live in San Miguel Allende for a little while. And it was terrifying to me because I thought he had sideways wheels on that car because he's going in and undulate, in and out of all the traffic. And everybody else was driving like that. And it took me 30 years to realize that I would be a menace on the highway in Mexico City because I would be trying to drive by the law. And if you don't play by the same rules as everybody else, you're a menace. And it's my narrow-mindedness. It took me 30 years to realize, I'm a rosy fellow. That means I'm self-righteous. And, the shame of it. It took me 30 years to realize that I had a self-righteous attitude, and that's why I was so terrified. I kept thinking that because I drive by the law, everybody else should drive by the law, not realizing that when in Rome, do as the Romans do is a different law, no matter what the signs say. And
you know how we call that? In Spanish we call like a dog in the middle of a freeway.
Yeah, a duck in the freeway. Yeah, I like it.
Driving in the same lane.
Yes. So at any rate, it takes a long time for things to sink in. And it takes a long time for things to crystallize. Suppose in one life, we develop a bad line of thinking. Maybe in the next life, it'll become a bad feeling attitude. And eventually we may act on it. But somewhere down the line, it's going to become manifest in the physical. The physical is the end of the road. And being the end of the road, we can't get away with anything. In the mind, we can rationalize. In the desire body, we can fantasize. In the etheric body, in the vital body, we can defer it by putting more energy to something. But in the physical, if you've got a broken bone, you've got a broken bone. If you've got hepatitis, you've got hepatitis, and there's no way of getting away from it. As Max loved to say, the mills of God grind slowly, but they grind exceedingly fine. Ralph Waldo Emerson said it even better. He said, a sick man is a sinner found out. So, when we are sick, when we're suffering, when we have a malformed body or something like that, we have come to the Saturnian certainty that is pointed to in St. Matthew's Gospel. We can't get away from it. It isn't always formulaic. You can't make a formula. You can't say that in one life it's in the world of thought, and in the next life it sinks into the desire body, and in the next life. It varies. Destiny is the thing that we think we know the best of the Rosicrucian teaching, and it's the most difficult. There are principles, like the principle of crystallization. But some people are going to do it faster, some people are going to do it slower, some people are going to become specialists in feeling, and there are different kinds of specializations, but there is no way that you can say without being able to see the whole process of the crystallization, there's no way that you're going to be able to see it through right to the end. There are no tailor-made quick little ditties that are going to tell all of it. So, having said that, let's just look at a few things. Suppose, for example, we spend too much of our activity in thought. You know the type of thing where it's hard to do even little things in life because it seems so hard in your mind, because your mind makes a bigger thing of it. That's the kind of person that if too much of that is done, it's likely to end up in the nervous system, because the nervous system is the system that is the expression of thought. However, if we put too much into the feelings, especially into the desireful feelings, the illness, when it manifests in the physical body, is most likely to be in the muscles, because the muscles are the vehicles that are the direct expression of desire. It's what allows us to move, to accomplish what we are motivated to do by the desire body. Boy, if I don't know how. I always have a tendency to want to take off all my clothes when I'm giving a talk, because I feel you cannot tell what you believe about something or the truth about something if you're not completely honest. And that manifests psychologically as a desire to have no barriers in between you. So I become slavishly confessional. But I learned that the muscles, the spirit rules the eye, seeing through the eye, but the muscles that direct the eye are ruled by the desire body. I don't think I need to say anything more beyond that. If we put too much into the etheric body or specialize things in the etheric body too much, we look for endocrine conditions. And if we're too much in the physical, if we become extreme sensualists, we get things like consumption, or we get the very Saturnian arthritis where our whole body becomes like one crystal. If our whole outlook toward life is much too introvertive, we expect problems in the gastrointestinal tract. And if we're much too extrovertive and recklessly so, we expect broken bones or lesions or things like that. There are rough ideas you can get, and you can use them when you have a major illness. I had a major illness a few years ago, and I spent a lot of time thinking about it and how it came to be, and it was extremely, extremely fruitful. There's nothing like pain and suffering and agony to cause you to think, what did I do? But again, we're into something very big, way beyond the scope of the talk. We're just trying to give little ideas so that you can go home and do all kinds of homework and think about it. I'm always uncomfortable about talking about these things publicly. I think if you talk about destiny conditions, illnesses, and psychological conditions, that should be done privately and should be done in. It's all right to talk to somebody back and forth and to counsel each other, but to do that, I think it's a more private thing. The thing is, all of these things, the illnesses, the things that come down through our bodies, through several lives, they're all within a archetype that lasts for a really long time. Some take longer, some take less long. However, since it is all one thing in which we are working, and since things can be done faster if we really learn concentration, which is the ability to focus that creative mind well, and if we draw on the living creative stuff of the life spirit, healing can take place. So we can see that from the things around us, that healing is a possibility. In fact, we are even commanded in St. Matthew's Gospel to heal. But when we heal, we follow the same extrovertive path of crystallization. If you look at the Rosicrucian healing service, I got a tape that's floating around. Daisy has a copy of it. I gave a talk at Daisy's on the Rosicrucian healing service and healing prayer. If you prevail on Daisy, I'm sure she'll give it to you to make copies off of. But it talks about the whole process of drawing on the life spirit and making manifest healing energy. But basically, if you look at the Rosicrucian healing service, it says in several places, you are creating an archetype. You are creating a thought form that is to be filled with the life spirit. And it is a thought form that matures very rapidly. It matures rapidly so that what might take several lives can be done sometimes in a few moments. But it all follows the path of crystallization, the path of extroversion. That part in the cosmoconception that talks about the path of extroversion is extremely, extremely important. We're talking about real healing. We're not talking about removing symptoms. The reason we experience things is to learn the truth. We are creating something, and in that creative process, we learn something true, something that was unknown even to God. And in that process, when we heal, we have to augment the regular creative process. If we only take pains away from a person, we are not doing them a favor, and we may be harming their soul growth. We have to give the substance of the life spirit. When we give that, there is wisdom and there is insight so that people can learn from their suffering more quickly, and so that the rapid fire archetype can help change their archetypes, the formation of their body, so that they can be healed more quickly. There has to be something that compensates for the long time of suffering. Everything comes out of light. Everything goes back to light. The thing with healing is that if we're using the life spirit, it is the ultimate solute. Everything can be dissolved in it. So one can even break down malformations and replace them. So when we're talking about healing, we're talking about the ability to do very, very miraculous things. When we're doing that, it's also a very pure thing, because when we are drawing on the life spirit, we are going beyond anything of self. And when we do that, we get away from all of the ego problems that get in the way. In fact, we can't even heal if we're thinking about self or if we're thinking on self. That becomes inhibitive of the flow of life spirit. As Christ said it, I of myself can do nothing. We're just about overstayed, so we have to move quickly. In St. Matthew's Gospel, there are 3 main mountaintop experiences. The first is the Sermon on the Mount. The second is the Mount of Transfiguration. And the third is at the Mount of Olives. If we look at each of them, when he comes down from the mountain, wondrous things are done. When he comes down from delivering the Sermon on the Mount, there is that just a flurry of healings, more than in any place else, and perhaps all over in the whole Gospel of St. Matthew, are done after he comes down from the Sermon on the Mount. When he comes down from the Mount of Transfiguration in Matthew's Gospel, he not only goes into another flurry of healing, but he ramifies the work by allowing the disciples, or teaching the disciples, to draw on the light of the life spirit and heal with it. When Christ comes down from the Mount of Olives, he works with the ultimate healing, the removing of the sin of the world, and a healing process that is so thorough, that is so deep, that is so rigorous, that it has not been fully carried out yet. It's still working through all of us. In each case, the descent from the mountain is precisely the following of the stream of crystallization, the stream of extroversion. This should be a model for us. We go inward as much as we can. We draw from as high a spiritual level as we can, and we carry it carefully as though we had molten gold, and we carry it all the way down the mountain at every step of the way, taking care, and that is how the healing process is accomplished. Even the way our own body is restored and taken care of. So if we want to have a sound physical body, and if we want to help others to have a sound physical body, it behooves us to be very much in control of the process of externalization at every step of the way coming down the mountain. We don't want to fall off on a cliff, and we don't want to get off on a byway or something like that, because what we learn when we turn inward is precious. It's precious, and it can help a lot of people that really need it. And so the more that we focus on that process, we're not looking at healing as an end. We're looking at healing as a living process. The ends of God happen in what we're doing every day. And so I can't recommend enough the following in our own consciousness when we take our thoughts and they become desires. If we do that, we are well on the way to a sound body. The assignment for tomorrow is to read all of St. Mark's Gospel, which after having... Remember, we're trying to dash through these and get a macrocosmic view, and this is a pushover because it's much shorter than Matthew's Gospel. All right, we're at the time of saying the Rosicrucian prayer, and yesterday I was persnickety about the grammar, and I'm trying to change the archetype so that we don't pluralize the word meditation. That we want one meditation, the meditation of Christ. We want one meditation in our heart, even though there are many of us meditating. Now, for today, let's try doing something fun, something different. Let's we don't have to always do this, but let's practice the extroverted stream. When we say, increase my love for thee, don't think it like you're loving a lover. Say, increase my love for thee, meaning to say the love that comes from Christ through us, that for the Christ's sake we're bringing out into the world, and it'll make a totally different prayer out of it. So let's try it in a different way, just for a different time. Oh God, increase our love for thee, so that we may serve thee better from day to day. Let the words of our mouths and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer.
Thank you, Sir Richard.
It was a bad talk. No. Please, never any clapping. Clapping breaks up positive vibrations. Yeah. Yes. It's a jarring sound.
I don't want you to tell anybody what I'm saying now, but you think you want to talk tomorrow for me also? Because I think you have much more to say and everybody would want it.
No.
Okay.
No. Because
I would feel it. I would want it, but it's okay.
If I talk all the time, I like to talk a lot, and I like to develop a long series of thoughts and ideas. But if I talk all the time and you don't talk, you won't get the chance to develop your way of talking.
Well, it doesn't matter. You're not here too often. I talk to you once a month on Sunday. So forget it.
Yeah.
Okay? It was important to me to tell you.